Hello everyone. Welcome to Hope and Wellness channel. I'm Omid, your host, and today we're going to talk about diabetes. And we want to see what it is. We want to see its symptoms, how we can diagnose it, and we want to see if it is manageable and curable. So they're saying that it's not curable. It's a genetic problem. You get it once and it just gets worse and worse and worse, and there is no escape from it. We want to see if that's 100% accurate and is it actually true or not. So let's get to it. Okay, let's talk about its origin and let's start with the meaning of the name. So diabetes comes from a longer name, diabetes mellitus, which is a Latin word, and it means passing through sugar. So in the ancient world, like thousands of years ago, they knew uh, that the human can have a condition that it requires drinking a lot of water, and they would go out and urinate a lot more than normal. So that was the first symptoms they would see, and it comes with like craving sugar and not getting satiated by the food and wanting to eat more and more. So they knew this condition, and the way to diagnose it was to look at the urine and see if by urinating somewhere, if there is any ant gathering around it. So ants would want to eat sugar, and they would go around the urine to to get that sugary taste of it. The other way of diagnosing it was by actually tasting the urine. So physicians would taste the urine of the patient and see that if it's sweet or not. So the condition was defined by passing through sugar through the body. So a lot of sugar is in the body and the body cannot handle it and let it go. So that was the condition. So it's a known condition to humankind. But in the modern medicine and during the uh, recent years, we have ways to diagnose and measure different things in the body. So we have ways other than tasting urine of the patient to know that. So what do? We actually measure the blood sugar. What is the blood sugar? Blood sugar is glucose. And glucose, as we have defined it before in the previous videos, please go and watch them if you haven't so far. Blood glucose is a monosaccharide, is the simplest form of the sugar molecule. And it's the molecule that every cell in the body knows how to use and how to metabolize to produce energy and to live. Okay, so that's the time. How much of it we need? Between 4 to 5 grams at each time. So at each moment, the whole body needs around 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and that's enough. So anything higher than that means that your blood sugar is high. And as we have spoken about it in previous videos, blood sugar is corrosive to the body. It's damaging body cells. If it's higher than normal, your body is getting damaged by that extra amount. So that extra amount, until you manage the blood sugar and lower it down again to the normal level, that time that the blood sugar is high, that extra amount is attaching to different cells in the body and damaging them and disrupting their mechanism and doing many bad things. So that's one of the bad things that it does. And then the way that the body manages that, it just adds to the damage. So we're going to talk about that as well. So nowadays, in modern medicine, we have other ways of diagnosing this condition. So we measure the blood glucose directly. So you go and get a fasted blood test, and they draw the blood. They measure the amount of blood glucose in that sample, and they tell you that you have like your blood glucose is 100 or 110 or 80 or 90. And if it's above 110, they would tell you that you have diabetes. If it is between 100 and 110, they would say that you have pre-diabetes and things like that. So you need to go on a medication or you need to be careful with what you're doing in your life. Okay. There is another way of looking at this condition, which is a bit more advanced and gives you a bigger picture of your health. And that's called HbA1c, hemoglobin A1c. And that's actually measuring the damage that the sugar is doing to the body. Okay. So naturally, as we have defined it before, if you put sugar and protein together and let them go, they attach and they bound together and they glycate. Okay, so that's called glycation. So they would measure this glycation in the hemoglobin part of the red blood cell. And they tell you a number. Okay, and if it's high, it means that you have higher of this glycation, and it means that you have higher blood sugar. So HbA1c tells you how much blood sugar you had during the past 2 to 3 months. Okay, so they say 2 to 3 months, but it can vary from 2 to 4 or even higher or lower, depending on different factors. So why I'm telling you this? I'm telling you this because all of these tests, they the combination of all of this together could give you a picture of your health, but not not any of them on its own is enough to conclude that you have the condition or not. So, for example, this HbA1c. So, let me first define what it is. The hemoglobin. So, hemoglobin is the protein part in the red blood cell that is carrying the oxygen. So your red blood cell is responsible to carrying oxygen from your lungs to different parts of the body. So you can oxidize the food, you can metabolize the food and produce energy. And in the process, like the output of that process is carbon dioxide that you breathe out. Okay, so you inhale oxygen, you exhale carbon dioxide. That input of oxygen gets carried around the body by this hemoglobin. Okay, that's that protein. So when your blood sugar is higher, the level of the glycation of this protein in the red blood cell is higher. So the lifetime of red blood cell is between 2 to 3 months. Okay, so they say 3 months. It could vary. So we expect that by that 3 months, when we see the red blood cell and we measure the glycation on that, we think that during the past 3 months that these red blood cells have been living, they had chance to get glycated. And if the glycation rate is higher, that means that you've had higher blood sugar during that 2 to 3 months. Okay, but it's not accurate, 100% accurate. So it's on its own, it doesn't give you the full picture because your red blood cell can live 2 months, or you can be very healthy and you can produce and generate red blood cells that are very healthy and they're strong and they can live up to 4 months or even longer. So that means that you might have higher HbA1c, but it's not because you had higher blood sugar. Okay, so if you want to have the full picture, you need to have the fasting blood glucose first, and then have the HbA1c as well, and then together that can give you a picture of that. And we're going to see a bit of details of how we can how the body manages the blood sugar, and you'll have more understanding of this. The other thing that they do is a glucose tolerance test, and that's like they ask you to come in fasted. They give you a glucose solution, like a glass of glucose, and they would measure your blood glucose on different intervals. So yeah, they would measure that beginning, and then you drink that uh, glucose solution, 100% glucose, and they would see that like after 1 hour, after 2 hour, after half an hour, how much your blood glucose is going high and how your body is handling that. So if your body is handling that very well, it means that you don't have diabetes. So your body is able to manage the blood sugar. That's a very accurate test. Okay, so it's actually seeing how much your body is able to manage the blood sugar by giving the body high amount of blood sugar instantly and then monitoring what it does. But it's not very common, so I haven't done it myself, and I haven't seen actually anyone close to me to have done that. But it's very common. It's not overly common. Okay, so those are the traditional ways of diagnosing this condition. What do I mean by traditional? I mean that these ways of measuring, they have been known to physicians and the medical community for many years. We all have had fasting blood glucose test, and we know that what does it mean to have high blood sugar or low blood sugar and stuff like that. How the body can handle the blood sugar. So what are the ways that the body can handle the sugary load that you have just had by your meal? Okay, so let's look at this graph on the screen. So you see a red line and a blue line. So the red line is indicating the blood sugar that you have. So let's say that you had a sugary meal and it's getting digested and absorbed to the body, and it's raising your blood sugar gradually. Okay, so as your blood sugar goes high, the body senses that high blood sugar and starts to produce and excrete insulin to the bloodstream, and in an effort to bring down the uh, blood sugar. Okay, so what is insulin? Insulin is a hormone that is getting produced by your pancreas, the beta cells in the pancreas, and it gets excreted into the bloodstream in response to high blood sugar, in response to um, the sugar level in the blood. Okay, and also other factors can produce can ask the pancreas to excrete more insulin to the bloodstream as well. Okay, so what does it do? The insulin, insulin goes around the body and asks other cells in the body to absorb more sugar. Okay, because sugar is damaging the body. It's so damaging that if the blood sugar goes higher than a certain level, it would damage the brain right away and you get unconscious. Okay, so you faint. So it's very corrosive, very damaging. So the body needs to regulate that blood level instantly and very quickly to avoid that damage. So by uh, by using insulin, it's asking the body is asking every cell in the body to absorb more blood sugar and just get that sugar out of the blood and store it somewhere and do something with it. Okay. So, for example, insulin goes to the first place that it goes to your liver. And it tells the liver to, it binds to the liver cells and it tells the liver to pull out the blood sugar and store them as glycogen. Glycogen is a complex molecule of sugar that is the storage form of blood sugar in the body. Okay, so that's a storage form. You store the blood glucose, the extra blood glucose that you have as glycogen in the liver. And later on, if you don't have enough blood sugar in the bloodstream, you can just ask the liver to just break down that glycogen and produce a bit of sugar and just give it to the bloodstream. That's the liver. Insulin goes to the muscles and tells the muscle cells to open up and absorb and suck in the blood sugar that they can. And muscle has its own glycogen reserve as well. Muscle can use up and produce energy out of blood sugar. Another place that insulin can go is to fat cells. And it tells the fat cell to absorb the sugar and do what? Produce fat. So the fat around the body that you see and the fat inside the body that you cannot see is in response to insulin telling the fat cell to absorb the sugar and produce energy and produce fat cells, like more fat molecules in the fat cell. So that's the way that insulin is trying to manage the blood sugar, okay, regulate the blood sugar. Let's go back to that graph. So the blood sugar is going high and the body excretes more insulin in response to that, and it reaches a point that it can manage the blood sugar. So the blood sugar is coming down. The body senses that, reduces the amount of insulin in the bloodstream, and they both go down. So as you see, like the red line comes down, and then the blue line comes down. That means blood sugar is coming down, insulin is coming down, and it reaches a level like at the lowest point that you see. It reaches a level that the brain doesn't have enough sugar available. Okay, so the whole point of having blood sugar in the body, other than as a fuel for the whole body, is to produce some parts of the brain that only can use blood sugar, and there are some other cells that can only use blood sugar as a fuel. But the most sensitive part that is commanding the rest of the body is brain. So when you don't have enough blood sugar, your brain senses that and you feel hungry, and the brain commands you to go and eat something, provide me with some energy. Okay, so at that lowest point that you see, you get that sense of hunger, and then you go for another sugary drink or sugary food, or a carbohydrate source, and then you start absorbing it again, and that cycle starts again. So we eat another sugary load and the blood sugar goes high, and then the insulin goes high. So that's how insulin is managing the blood sugar. But insulin is not only managing the blood sugar. If that was the only thing that the insulin was doing, it would have some downsides to it, as we see in the in next few minutes. But it would be good because you have like some blood sugar, like high levels of blood sugar, and then you would have some insulin, and it's all good because it's getting managed. But insulin is doing many more things. Insulin is doing like more than 100 different usages and effects in the body is known to the medical community by now. I'm sure it's more than that, and they're going to discover more than that as well. So when the insulin level is high, higher than normal, like that level that you see in that graph, it's doing everything more. It's not just doing managing the blood sugar more. Okay, so all of that 100 different effects in the body, they're being done more and more aggressively. So if it's like changing some chemicals in the brain, insulin actually does that. It's affecting different chemicals and neurotransmitters in the brain. It is done more and more. If it's stimulating the body to store more things, to build up more things, because another usage of insulin is as a anabolic hormone. So it commands the body to build things like build fat tissues or build glycogen or build muscle, things like that. Okay, or it stops breaking down different things. As we have defined before in the previous video, metabolism is two different processes, two different major processes: breaking down things and building up things. So it stops breaking down things. So everything that insulin is doing is being done more and more aggressively. Okay, so, and that's damaging to the body. Our body is good with insulin. Insulin is a natural thing, is a natural hormone, and we require that to live, but at a normal level, not at a high level. Okay, and this is a very important point, and we'll see why is that important, because that's one of the interventions that that your doctor, your physician would tell you to do in like later stages of diabetes. Okay, I hope that you understand that what's the blood sugar and insulin relation in the body, and what are the damages of insulin. What's one of the damages of high blood insulin? So on the screen, you see like a schematic of a cell in the body. Okay, that's like a sample. So in the cell, we have different parts, and it has so different organelles in the cell that are doing different things. Each of those things that you see in the cell, they're doing different responsibilities. Some of them are transporters, so they go to the surface of the cell and they bring in materials. They take something from within the cell and they take it out and let it go. They create something inside the cell and things like that. So, for example, you see those things that are like ladder in the middle. That those are supposed to be mitochondria, and mitochondria is like the powerhouse of the cell. So they get materials like the fuel, and they generate uh, energy for the cell and heat and stuff like that. Okay, so something that happens when you have a lot of insulin around the cell is resistance. As I told you, insulin is commanding the cells to do different things, more than 100 different things. Okay, and the cells after a while get tired of that message and they want to resist against it. So they get resistant to the insulin. Okay. How do they do that? There are different mechanisms. So by inflammation, by reducing the number of the insulin receptors in the cell, that those are sensitive organelles, sensitive parts of the cell that can see the insulin and receive the command and then go inside and do something with that command. So cell can reduce the number of those receptors, and it can do different things to get resistant and to get deaf to that message. Okay, so it doesn't, after a while, when you get that resistance, it doesn't matter how loud you shout at a cell with insulin. Okay, so give it a lot of insulin, it doesn't listen to you. So you get insulin resistant. When you get insulin resistant, a cell gets insulin resistant, it doesn't listen to the insulin. It's not only about the blood sugar that cannot be handled. More than 100 different processes in the body gets disrupted. So let's say that we have insulin resistance in liver cells. Okay, that's, as I told you, liver cells are the first cells in the body that see the insulin and start to bringing down the blood sugar. That's the most important organ in the body that can regulate the blood sugar. Let's say the liver cells gets insulin resistant. What happens? Liver cannot handle the blood sugar and cannot regulate the blood sugar as it should be. And you start to get a phenomenon called fatty liver disease. So the liver starts to produce a lot of fat inside the liver, which is not supposed to be there. And you get fatty liver. And previously, it was fatty liver disease was only associated with consuming a lot of alcohol. Okay, and it was called like fatty liver disease on its own because it has one cause. Okay, right now they have another phenomenon in the medical community called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And that means you get fatty liver not because of consuming a lot of alcohol, but because of something else. What is that? That's the damage to the liver from different sources. We're going to talk about different causes and reasons of that. But one of them is insulin resistance in the liver. Okay, so that's, for example, the liver. So your liver stops functioning properly. You will lose a lot of good things that the liver detoxification and a lot of different things that the liver is doing, like converting different hormones to the active form, like thyroid hormone and things like that. So all of those things can get disrupted by this insulin resistance. So that's very important. You get insulin resistance at for example, fat tissue in your body. The fat tissue can get insulin resistant. So insulin goes to the fat and to the fat cell and says, there are a lot of sugar in the blood, receive them and produce some fat, get fatter. And the fat cell doesn't listen to that. So what happens? Not only you cannot reduce the blood sugar and the blood sugar stays high, the fat cell thinks that because it's not seeing the insulin message, it thinks that it there is not enough fuel in the body, so let me just release some of the fat. So it releases the fat into the bloodstream as well. So you will have a lot of fat in the bloodstream and a lot of sugar in the bloodstream. Okay, and this insulin resistance can happen everywhere in the body. Different, so it's not happening around the body all at the same time. Every organ, every cell type can get it differently and individually. Okay, so let me give you another example and then we go to the next topic. If you get insulin resistance in the brain, what happens? Your brain cannot absorb the sugar from the bloodstream. And the brain cells require fuel, some form of fuel. What's the fuel when the blood sugar is high? The main fuel is sugar. So when the cell is insulin resistant, it cannot receive that sugar. Okay? So you suffer from different symptoms like seizure, like Alzheimer's disease, things like that. Those are consequences of insulin resistance in the brain. Okay, so that's one of the um, bad things that happens when you have a lot of insulin in the body for a long time. Okay, so what are the causes of uh, high insulin? One is having high carbohydrate foods, high carb diet, a lot of bread, pasta, sugar, sugary drinks, sweeteners, and stuff like that. That it stimulates the body to have a lot of sugar, and the body responds with a lot of insulin to manage that. But there is another reason that the body creates insulin and excretes insulin, and that's just eating. So whenever you eat something, body has some insulin response to that. If it's a high carb meal like pasta bread and things like that, that insulin response is a lot higher. If it's like a bit of protein, that insulin response is a bit lower. If it's fat, you eat a piece of butter, like a spoon of butter or olive oil or things like that, fat, you're almost not getting any insulin response. Okay, so Um, every time that you eat, that that meal has some fat, excuse me, some carb or some protein, you're getting an insulin response. Okay, so why I'm telling you this, these two different ways that uh, the insulin goes high, because these are two methods that we can manage the insulin level in the body. We're going to talk about those later. So remember this, carb on its own is the main reason that you get high insulin in the body, and all of that, all of those damages that I just told you about. And then every time that you eat, you get that uh, insulin response as well, unless you eat only fat, like a spoon of olive oil, things like that, which we usually don't do. Okay, so let's talk about another reason of insulin resistance. So, other than having high levels of insulin in the body, that tells every cell in the body that you need to do something, and the cells try to protect themselves from that high insulin level. That's one way of getting insulin resistant. There is another way as well. So consuming seed oils, things like sunflower oil or safflower or things like that, everything that is not coming from that is coming from seeds. Okay, and they tell like these are vegetable oils, so they label them vegetable oils, but we know that they're not vegetable, they are oils of the seeds. So seed oils directly can cause insulin resistance. Okay, so that's a very important and powerful way of getting insulin resistance. So consuming a lot of seed oils is another way of it, and they compare them the same. So like a high carb diet is similar to consuming a lot of seed oils in your diet. Where do you get those seed oils? You might cook with them, which is the worst way of consuming that, because those are um, prone to get oxidated and getting rusted. By oxidation, I mean rusted, getting spoiled by the oxygen. And when you heat those seed oils, they are more prone to get oxidated and get rusted, get spoiled. And that spoiled oil in the body is not recognized as food, and it has different impacts. Okay, so I don't want to go to too much detail on that and how it damages the cells and the body, but that's enough for this discussion, that CETOs are an important reason that we're getting insulin resistance. Okay, so the insulin cannot do its job because we're consuming a lot of CETOs. So where do you get that? That by cooking with them, consuming with them, like using in salad dressing. So every dressing that you buy from the store, they come with seed oils. Just read the label, the ingredient list. Usually the first one or the second one is seed oil, some sort of vegetable oil. Mayonnaise. Usually it comes with a lot of seed oil. What else? French fries, chips. That's getting fried in seed oil, and that's like old and rusted seed oil that they're using for hours and hours, or maybe days and weeks. So all of these things, so every processed food, every ultra processed food that they want to extend its shelf life, usually they use these seed oils in them. So read the packages, read the labels, avoid that. And every time that you eat outside in a restaurant, they usually cook in seed oils because those are cheaper. Okay, and they don't taste like anything, so they don't taste like olive oil and stuff like that. So to make sure that you're not consuming a lot of seed oils, read the packages and avoid eating out, or if you're eating out, just ask the the manager that what sort of oil you're using. Okay, so that's this whole discussion of resistance is one of the bad things that happens to the body when you have a lot of insulin produced in the body and a lot of insulin going around it. But there is another downside to that as well. The other downside is deficiency of the insulin. So you might, your pancreas, the beta cells in the pancreas, might produce so much insulin for so long that they cannot produce anymore. That deficiency means two things. First of all, you need a level of insulin in the body to manage your blood sugar that your body cannot produce anymore. So you need a lot of more insulin to force the body to manage the blood sugar. And your body naturally cannot do that. Even if you're healthy and nothing else is happening in the body cannot handle that. And that's when your doctor would tell you to go and get some extra insulin. Okay, we'll talk about that. The other thing is your pancreas would get damaged by working so hard for so long that it cannot produce even the natural levels that it could do if it wasn't hard. So you get deficiency in insulin. Okay, and that's bad because insulin is doing a lot of different things. Insulin is a very important hormone in the body. And if you don't have enough of it, you cannot regulate your blood sugar and then you cannot do all of those other 100 things. Okay. So that's about insulin. But if you look at the reasons that we get insulin resistant, uh, we're all talking about, high carb and blood sugar and stuff like that. And I hope that you realize that sugar is dangerous to the body. But I hope that you have this question as well, that if the sugar is so dangerous to the body, and at the same time you're telling me that the sugar is the main source of fuel for some cells and for brain, for example, and if you don't have it, your brain command you to go and eat more and stuff like that. But what's the solution then? How we can manage that? So the good news is our body has different sources of fuel. The alternate fuel to the sugar, the first one is fat. Okay, so we have our body cells can use different things to produce energy, like lactate and fat and sugar and stuff like that. But the main ones are sugar and fat. Let's talk about that alternate fuel. So every cell in the body, other than just a couple of types, red blood cell and some cells in the kidney and some parts in the brain, very, very limited number of the cells. Every other cell knows how to use and metabolize fat as fuel. Okay. So if you give a body cell, a normal body cell, some fat and some glucose, which one it uses? It uses the fat. It prefers to um, metabolize fat over sugar if you don't give it a command to use some of those. Okay, one of those. What do I mean by that? I'll explain in a minute. So let's talk about how the cells can use fat. So when you store extra sugar and extra energy in the body as fat in your around the body and everywhere in the adipose tissue, that's the fat under your skin, subcutaneous fat under your skin, and, so you store that extra energy as fat, and when you don't want it, that storage and you need some energy, those fat cells just release some fat and let it go in the bloodstream and it travels to the liver, and your liver converts them to some molecule called ketones, ketone bodies, a beta hydroxybutyrate. So that BHB, that ketone is a molecule that every cell in the body knows how to use that. So let me quickly go through that process again. So your fat cells, when they release some fat, they send them to the liver converts them to ketones, and then the ketones go around the body and get used as fuel, as an alternate fuel to the sugar that you have in your bloodstream. Okay? So, this state that your body starts producing ketones, because you don't have ketones all the time. When you have high blood sugar and when you have high insulin in response to that high blood sugar, your body doesn't produce any ketones. That state of producing ketones is called ketosis. Okay, so when you're in ketosis, your body is producing a lot of ketones, a lot of alternative fuel, and it's a very good state to be. Why? Because the body cells, they don't require any command to absorb and to stock in the ketones. They don't need insulin. Okay, so without any command, without any force to tell them to do something, they can just suck in the ketones and start producing energy. So imagine that state that we had in the brain, the insulin resistance in the brain that would cause seizure or Alzheimer's disease and stuff like that. Imagine that you're in ketosis, your brain cells are not listening to the insulin command to use the blood sugar, and they're dying, they're starving, and then you provide them with some ketones. What happens? They start using the ketone because the body cells, the brain cells, don't require insulin to use ketones. So they can just start producing some energy and start living again, running again. That's a very good state to be. So how can you do that? By lowering the blood sugar. Every time that the blood sugar comes down, the insulin in the bloodstream comes down, the body, the fat cells get this message that I can release some fat, and then the fat goes around the body, goes to the liver, and you get into a state of ketosis. Okay? So that's the role of insulin in prohibiting the body from going to ketosis or letting the body go to its natural state. So, arguably, ketosis is the natural state of the body. So, all of us should be in ketosis most of the time, other than the times that we eat something that our body responds with some insulin because we have eaten something and we need to use that material to do something, to build some tissues, some muscles, some fat, some glycogen, some things like that. Other than those times, every other time, we should be in ketosis. Okay? So we should change our diet and lifestyle in a way to stay in ketosis. Back to the diabetes and different types of that, and then use this knowledge that now we have from the blood sugar, insulin, ketones, and ketosis. Okay, let's talk about different types of the diabetes and the interventions that the physician might advise you to do. So, first of all, diabetes type 1. Diabetes type 1 is usually a genetic problem that uh, you have, and it means that your body, your beta cells in the pancreas, they cannot produce enough insulin or any insulin at all. And that's a dangerous situation because you need insulin to, first of all, to tell different cells to use the blood sugar, to use the sugar to for energy, and then you need insulin to do many more things in the body. So when you don't have it, you're in trouble. And what's the intervention? They would give you an insulin pen that, or a pill or things like that, that you can consume like once a day or every few hours and stuff like that. So there are different types of insulin, like rapid acting or long acting that they can, for example, long acting is the one that you uh, inject once or take in once a day, and it just slowly releases and it slowly um, affects the body during the day. So that's the intervention, giving you some more insulin for the situation that you don't have enough insulin because your body cannot produce the natural level of the insulin that your body requires to handle all of these processes. Okay, that's diabetes type 1. What's diabetes type 2? Diabetes type 2 is when your blood sugar is so high because you've consumed high carb meals for so long, and the blood sugar stays high for a long time, and then you get the impacts of that we just discussed before. So what's the intervention to that? They usually give you pills like metformin or different things like that that they help you to lower down the blood sugar. There are different mechanisms to do that. So those drugs and medicines, they do different things. Like some of them help the body cells to listen more to insulin. So they uh, try to fix the insulin resistance. Some of them uh, lower the blood sugar by inhibiting some hormones that produce energy and stuff like that. Some of them uh, get you to eat less. They prevent that hunger signal and stuff like that. So those are the interventions. But a very bad situation is when you get insulin resistant in type 2 diabetes, and then they give you more insulin to fix that. So as we explained in the previous slide, when you have high blood sugar for so long, you will have high blood insulin for so long, and then your different tissues get insulin resistant. Okay, so they try to protect themselves. That means that they're not listening to the normal tone of insulin in the bloodstream. So you need to shout higher and higher. And you reach at a level that your pancreas cannot produce enough insulin. So that message is not loud enough for the cells to listen. Okay? So what do? In this situation? Sometimes they give you more insulin to inject. And uh, I don't know what to say. That's ridiculous. Because the whole problem is caused by high insulin. Why on earth would you give someone that is having situation of high insulin more insulin to fix the problem? It fixes the problem, it lowers the blood sugar, but it doesn't fix you know the main problem, the root cause. It's actually worsening it. Okay, so that's type 2 diabetes. So uh, what's the relation of these two? These are, as I just explained, these are different diseases. These are different conditions. One is not having enough insulin. The other one is having high blood sugar, having insulin resistance. So your body doesn't listen to the insulin. So the only reason that these are related and they're using the same name is the symptom is high blood sugar. So they're different, totally different diseases. The intervention is different, and they're not related that much. The only relation is that symptom. The symptom is high blood sugar. So that's why they're calling it type 1 and type 2. There is another uh, type as well, type 1.5 or LADA. So LADA means it's a abbreviation for latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. So what does that mean? So sometimes you get this autoimmune issue, sometimes because you had diabetes type 2 for a long time, that your pancreas cells get damaged, or sometimes you get this autoimmune issue because you're consuming things that are causing that autoimmune issue. I will have another video on that, on the autoimmune, the whole autoimmune diseases and stuff like that. But you have that's the situation that uh, you're not born with the type 1 diabetes, but you're getting diabetes later. Okay, as an adult, you're getting that. So your pancreas getting damaged by your own immune cells, or by the effects of the high sugar, high blood sugar, and stuff like that, and then you get type 1 diabetes. So they call it 1.5. So it's both of type 1 and type 2. That's another type as well. And then there is this concept of pre-diabetes. I want to talk about this because it's very important. So I hope that by now you have a good understanding of different levels of the blood sugar and the role of insulin in managing that, and insulin resistance and stuff like that. So it's it's very interesting that they tell you that you have pre-diabetes as if you're getting diabetes. So I explained the whole situation of diabetes and stuff like that. Pre-diabetes, I think it's a wrong term. You cannot be, let me give you an example. You cannot be a little bit pregnant. You either are pregnant or not. You cannot be a little bit, infected by virus. You're either infected by virus or not. Okay. So pre-diabetes means that you have diabetes, that you've done something to in your lifestyle, or your body has some genetic predispositions that you have diabetes. Okay. Pre-diabetes means that the symptoms are not as high as they say that you have full diabetes. So it's not a correct term, I think. That's my opinion. Well, so when your doctor tells you that you have pre-diabetes, translate that, interpret that to I have diabetes. What can I do? It's a dangerous situation. I should do something right now. Okay. And then um, how do they diagnose these conditions? As I explained before, they diagnose it by blood glucose test, and then HbA1c in recent years and stuff like that, which doesn't give you a proper and accurate picture of your health. Okay. Why is that? So let's say that you're having a high carb diet for a lot of years, and then your blood sugar stays the same. How does the body manages that high blood sugar? By now we know that body produces more insulin and tries to keep the blood sugar at a good level. Okay. So every time that you get that blood test, your blood glucose is at a perfect level. It might go a couple of points higher or lower and stuff like that, and it's all good. Okay. So your doctor is happy, you're happy, you don't feel anything. But underneath that, your body is just screaming for help. It's just producing more insulin, more and more and more. And gradually, every part in your body might get insulin resistant. and you're getting all of those damages in your body. But it takes years because your body is regulating blood sugar so tightly because it's so corrosive, so damaging to the body that it doesn't let the blood sugar stay high for a long time. And it manages the blood sugar very well, very tightly. And it does that for a lot of years until it reaches a point that it cannot do that anymore. Okay? So it fails to manage that. And that's when you get diagnosed with diabetes. So if you look at it correctly, if you can diagnose this condition at the very beginning, when the insulin starts to go high and you're starting to get these symptoms, then you will know it soon enough to be able to reverse it, to be able to stop this progression of the disease and condition. Okay. I hope that you by now you're guessing what's the best way of diagnosing these conditions. And if you're guessing that's getting a insulin level blood test, like fasting insulin, you're right. So if you can measure your fasting blood insulin, because the insulin level should be at a certain level in the body, and it shouldn't go high and low when you're fasted. And if it's higher, it means that you have some level of resistance in some part of the body that it's not listening to the insulin. And your body is just responding with producing more insulin. Okay. So you're catching insulin resistance early enough if you see high blood insulin in the blood test. Okay. So that's the best way of catching this disease early on. And anytime that your doctor is ordering some blood tests for you and it's just blood glucose, just getting the fasting blood glucose, that's not enough. Just talk to your doctor and ask him or her to order you uh, blood glucose, HbA1c, and then fasting insulin as well. Okay, so all of these together can give you a picture of how healthy you are. Okay, and if he's not ordering anything related to diabetes and blood sugar and stuff, the only thing that he or she can do to make sure that you're healthy enough is fasting insulin. So fasting insulin is much more important comparing to the rest of the blood test uh, in this discussion that you can do. So that's the first thing that you should do. Okay, so every time, but they don't order it normally, so they find it very hard. I don't know why that is. Maybe insurance doesn't pay for that, or I don't know why that is, but that they don't usually do that. So try to convince them. Try to take this discussion to them and convince them to order that test for you. That's the only way that you can catch the uh, disease early on. So you have time to do something about it. Okay. But you might be interested in knowing that if you are insulin resistant or not. So there is another way of doing that. There is another test that they can do. It's called HOMIR, so homeostasis model assessment of insulin resistance. And it's not a test. So it's not like insulin test or blood glucose test. It's a calculation. Okay. So they multiply fasting glucose by fasting insulin and then divide it by 405. And if the result is close to 1, it means that your body is very responsive to insulin. So it's not resistant and it's good. And as it goes higher and higher, like above 2 and stuff like that, your body is insulin resistant. So there is some level of insulin resistance in some part of the body. So together, fasting insulin and then HOMIR can give you a good picture of your metabolic health, how healthy your body is in relation to managing the blood sugar and stopping all of those damages of blood sugar, high blood sugar, and high blood insulin. Now let's talk about what you can do. So at the beginning, I told you that we want to see if we can manage this or not. So, as you have heard this, might have heard this before, they tell you that diabetes is a condition that cannot be cured. It's a genetic problem. You get this problem because someone in your family had this problem. So if you have some close relative that has diabetes, type 1, 2, or whatever, and you get diabetes, that means that it's in your genes, and then you're doomed. There is no escape for you. And that's wrong. Okay. So, as we have spoken about this, you can you can do things to not get diabetes, and then you can do things to reverse diabetes. Okay, so it's different for type 1 and type 2. For type 1, it means that the pancreas doesn't produce enough insulin. And that means that there are some damages done to the pancreas. And if the damage is permanent, which is usually are, or if you have a genetic problem that you cannot produce, that's a natural thing that is happening in the body, you cannot produce insulin enough. Okay, so that's the only condition that you need to use exogenous insulin, like use those pens or pills or whatever, okay, to take some insulin. Okay, so, but if you have diabetes type 2, it means that your body is capable of producing enough insulin in the body, but you're doing something bad with your lifestyle to the body, that level of insulin is not enough. Okay, so your body is resistant to that and it's not listening to all of the problems that we just talked about. So you can change that lifestyle, you can change the diet to make the body to listen to lower level of insulin. Okay, so that type 2 diabetes is very different. You can fix the problem, you can better the condition very rapidly, very soon. So let me give you a fact. That insulin resistance in the liver that I told you, that your uh, liver gets fatty, you get fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, because you have consumed a lot of carbohydrates for a long time, a lot of sugars in your food. That condition can get better in 2 weeks by 50%. So 50% of the fat in the liver can go away in 2 weeks, only 2 weeks. So they have done researches on this, and this is proved. So by fixing your lifestyle only for 2 weeks, you can heal 50% of your liver, and you can rescue your liver of insulin resistance, at least 50% of it. Okay, and you can continue that. And there are case reports that people have done, like they've changed their lifestyle for 2 months, 3 months, and they've reversed type 2 diabetes completely. So they have put the disease into remission fully after a couple of months, 3 months, and something like that. And it doesn't come back. So as long as you keep your lifestyle healthy and you have a good diet and lifestyle, which is natural to the human body, the disease doesn't come back. Okay, so you can fix type 2 diabetes for sure, but it's not something that you can do it whenever you like. You need to do it as soon as possible, because if the damage is to some parts of the body, the damage because of the high blood sugar and high blood insulin is to some parts of the body that cannot be reversed and healed. So liver is a good one because it can heal very fast. But if the damage is into some other parts of the body, the reversing process is much harder and sometimes not possible. Okay, so there is always hope, and even severe cases can be reversed a lot, but do it sooner. It's not an excuse to say, oh, okay, every time that I can make this decision and I can reverse this and stuff like that. Therefore, I don't need to do it today. I can do it tomorrow. No, you need to do it today to avoid those situations that is irreversible. Okay. So this is about type 2 diabetes, but we can use the same concept for type 1 diabetes as well. So if you have this genetic predisposition that you cannot produce enough insulin, or your pancreas gets damaged in your adulthood and you cannot produce insulin anyway, you can change your lifestyle in a way that you don't need as much insulin. Okay, so maybe a um, a minor shot in the morning of insulin is enough for you to go about your day. So you don't need frequent shots every meal, before meal, after meal, and stuff like that. How you can do that? By going into a ketosis state. We explain what that is. By by letting your body to use fat as its main fuel. By letting the body to stop forcing all of the cells in the body to use up more sugar, and to force the cells to ignore the fat, the available fat as a fuel, and start using sugar. Okay. So if you don't need that insulin to command the cell to use the fuel, and it can use the fuel without the command, without insulin, then you don't need as much insulin. But these are for type 1 diabetes, especially. You need to do this with your doctor, okay? So because the level of the insulin that you give yourself, that you take in, is very important. So you need to work very closely with your physician. Okay, so let's go uh, about what you can do. So you can change your food, okay? You can limit the amount of carbohydrates that you take in to make your body to use fuel, fat as fuel. So what do we mean by limit the carbs? Like avoid high carb foods like bread, pasta, biscuit, honey, uh, sugary foods, ultra processed foods, and stuff like that. Okay, that have a lot of sugar in it. Uh, so how low you should go? So to be in a ketosis state, they tell you that you need to be below 50 grams of carb in your diet, and that's total carbs. We're talking about total carb, and it means every carbohydrate type in the food. But they're telling, so they sometimes they're confusing that with the net carb. Net carb is the amount of carb of the food minus the fiber that your body cannot absorb. If you're talking about the net carb, that net carb should be below 30 grams. Okay, and that's when you want to stay in ketosis and stuff like that. But if you're having diabetes type 2 or type 1, if you're reversing a condition, insulin resistant condition, you need to go even lower, below 20 gram, and or maybe as close as to zero, even the net carb. So the net carb of the food should be as low as possible to reverse this problem. And then when you fix that problem, and by all of those tests, blood tests that we talked about, like the home IR and stuff, you realize that you're feeling good. If you decide to have more carbohydrates, then you can. But usually people don't do that because you feel so good that you don't want to go back to that. So when you limit your carbohydrates, you need to eat something. What are you replacing that with? We've talked about it. You replace that with fat. And by fat, I don't mean seed oils. Okay? We have talked about that. Seed oils directly and indirectly cause insulin resistance. Okay? So we don't want to consume any seed oil, sunflower oil, I don't know, vegetable oils, and every other seed oil that is available to the market. Okay, so we don't want to consume those. We don't want to consume any product that is made by those. We don't want to go to the restaurants that cook the food using those oils. Okay, those are bad. So every other type of oil other than seed oil is usually good, like um, animal fats, animal products like dairy, butter, ghee is the best. Tallow, lard, things like that. Okay, the beef fat, lamb fat, and stuff like that. So olive oil. Fruit oils, not the seed oils, like avocado oil. Those are good fats. Uh, the egg yolk, the fat that is in the egg yolk, fatty fish, things like that. Okay, so those are good fats. Consume a lot of those and replace the carbohydrates with those. And by fat, I don't mean trans fat either. So trans fats are bad and they're banned in many countries, so they're not allowed to be used in the food, but they're still using them in some restaurants and in some ultra processed foods because they are banned, but I think there is a minimum level that they can use, like it's 0.5% or something like that, and they still are using it in some. So the best thing is to avoid ultra processed food at all costs. Okay, the packaged food, we talked about that. Go back to that video and what sort of food that's best for the body. Use those concepts. We don't want to eat anything that has a lot of ingredients that we don't understand what they are. Okay, so limit the carbs, increase the fat, good fats. And then what else you can increase when you're limiting the carb? Because you're limiting your intake and you have room to increase other things. Increase the protein as well. Protein is a um, necessary ingredient, necessary food for the body. Not because you want to build muscle, because it is required for thousands of different processes in the body. So your metabolisms and that is breaking down things and building up things. It requires protein to do almost everything that is in the body. All the processes, they require protein to do something, creating enzymes, creating hormones. Some hormones are created of protein. And fun fact for you, there is no hormone that is created out of carbohydrates in the body. As you know, I've talked about this many times. Carbohydrates is not essential to human body. Okay, so we don't have essential carbs, but we have essential fats and we have essential amino acids, the building blocks of protein. We have hormones that are created based on fat that you eat, and we have hormones that are created based on protein and amino acids that you eat. But we don't have hormones that are based on carbs. So limit those, increase fat and protein. What sort of proteins that you want? You want natural form. Okay, so get natural forms. Don't go for powders and boxes of proteins or bars of protein bars and stuff like that. They add extra things. Just read the ingredients of that. They're horrible. They add chemicals. They add sweeteners to them. They add flavors, and they call it natural flavors sometimes, but it's not natural. It doesn't mean anything. It's not in a natural form. Okay, it's everything that they make is coming from nature. Okay, so they're combining different things, and it's coming from nature, but you cannot call it natural. If a raspberry flavor is coming out of a powder, it doesn't mean that it's natural. It's coming from raspberry, but they have done things to it. So they denatured that. Okay. So go for the natural form. What is the best form? The best bioavailable form of protein for the human body is animal sources of protein. Eggs, beef, lamb, chicken, fish, and stuff like that. And then other natural forms are like um, avocado, almond, um, pistachio, and things like that as well. Okay, so you can eat different sources of protein, but the most bioavailable ones are the animal sources of protein. But by any means, use every form of protein that you like, only if it's natural and unsweetened, unflavored, and not ultra processed. So it's not coming as a package or as a bar or in a box with a food label with a long list of ingredients. Okay. And then something very powerful that you can do. So change your diet in a way that I just explained. But remember the fact that I told you that every time that you eat, your body has an insulin response to that eating. Okay. So another thing that you can do alongside with changing your diet to limit the carbohydrate and increase the fat and protein is to restrict the eating window. What do I mean by that? Some people call it intermittent fasting, which is not 100% accurate. Intermittent fasting means sometimes you fast, meaning you don't eat, you don't ingest anything, and sometimes you eat, which is not 100% accurate, and it's not the thing that I mean. I mean to restrict your eating window. So traditionally, we think that the most important meal of the day is breakfast, and we need to eat once we wake up because we need energy for the body and we need to do our things. And then we need to have another thing, another meal at lunch, and then we need to have another meal at dinner. I know, but not to provide our body with the energy that it requires. And we need to have snacks as well. Okay. So, and those snacks are necessary because your blood sugar comes down and we need to provide it with some food to bring the blood sugar high and stuff like that. So because the brain needs fuel. But by now, you know that that's not accurate. And your body doesn't require the carbohydrate intake and it doesn't require that much of blood sugar. So what you can do is you can restrict that window of eating instead of 16 hour of eating to maybe 8 hour of eating, 4 hour of eating. So how can you do that? I will have other videos to explain the methods and the ways that you can go about this, but very quickly, you can, for example, skip a meal, like your breakfast. So you are fasted through the night because you've been sleeping. Uh, Usually we don't eat when we sleep. So 8 hours of sleep, let's say that you're um, in a fasted state for 8 hours. Let's say we don't eat 2 hours before that. That's 10 hours of fasting. And then let's say we skip the breakfast, which is giving you another 3, 4, 5 hours. So you will be in in a fasted state for around 15, 16 hours, which is enough to give your body some rest to bring down the insulin level. Okay, so it doesn't need to pump the insulin so often, and it gives the rest of the body to reduce that resistance that it has built up against that high blood level of insulin. Okay, so restrict the eating window by skipping a meal like breakfast or dinner, something like that. Try to have your meals close to each other and then skip the snacking. So don't snack. Okay, have your proper meal like with a lot of natural food, high fatty, high protein meals, limited carbs, but a full meal. Just have that, don't snack anything, and then have another meal a few hours later. Just close them together, just have them very close to each other, like in a few hours. Then give your body chance to heal itself for the rest of the day. Okay, that's very important. So together, the diet that you have and the eating windows that you have is very powerful, and those go together very well. So, um, and what else you can do? You can avoid stress and you can do exercise. What do they do for you? Every time that you have a stress, you have a blood sugar response to that stress because your body thinks that something bad is happening. I need to produce some fast energy to the body, and produce some blood sugar, and the response to that blood sugar is high insulin as well. Okay, so avoid stress. How you can avoid stress in these days? It's hard. You get bad news. You get stress from the work, pressure, and stuff like that. And bad things, disasters happens in life. But you need to exercise to make your body to be stronger in responding to stress. Okay, so you calm down the body by exercising, by just going and walking, by doing some yoga, by doing some activity, by working on some physical work. Okay, by doing that, you're just lowering the stress level down, and then you're forcing your body to use up the extra blood sugar in your bloodstream. So without insulin, exercise forces your body to use up the blood sugar. Okay. So when you're doing exercise, you're doing two good things. First, you're lowering down the stress in the body, which lowers down the blood sugar naturally. And then you're using up that extra level of blood sugar that you might have in the bloodstream. Okay. So avoid the stress, do exercise, have good sleep, and all of these things together can fix the problems in a few months. Okay. As I told you that there are case reports that people have fixed their diabetes type 2 in 2 months or 3 months. Okay. There are a lot of cases like that. Okay. I hope that you've used this episode. And I know it was a long one, so I'll try to wrap it up here. I know that there are a lot of points that you want me to go into details, and I will have videos about those, like things like insulin resistance, restricted window of eating, um, seed oils, and stuff like that. I will talk about those later on in the future videos, but I hope that this is useful for you if you have diabetes or if you have someone who has diabetes. Share this video with them, and next time that you're talking to your physician, to your doctor, and you're asking for advice from them, have this knowledge and information, use it to make your life better. The interventions that you want to do in your life, just do it wisely. Okay. Until next time, let's focus on hope and wellness.